Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with co-founder and creative director of SBX Productions, Vince Quinn. Formerly in the world of national sports radio, these days he helps entrepreneurs get started in podcasting through the power of pilots. He works with entrepreneurs, charitable foundations, and brands to unlock the power of marketing and community building through podcasts. Before jumping into podcasting, he spent nearly 10 years in radio, working his way from handing out t-shirts at bars to hosting the nationally syndicated The Vince Quinn Show across 225 stations in the U.S. and Canada. He is a teacher, collaborator, and a smoothie enthusiast. Dig this evolving storyline.
Where are you located?
So I'm in Philly. So Philly, yeah, that's where I did all my radio work for the most part. Like started in Philly and then did New York and New Brunswick. I was around, but yeah, I'm in Philly.
Let's get into your work. Let's get into your world of and what drives you. And I want to begin with, 4 years ago we were trying to figure out this whole pandemic, and it really kind of took everything by storm. There was a lot of uncertainty. How did you ultimately make it through that time period, and how did it change you?
How did I make it through that time period? To some degree, I couldn't even process it, to be honest with you, because at that point. So what happened with me is I was working in Philly at WIP. I was doing sports talk radio. So I was working at WIP. I was also working at CBS Sports Radio, and I was living in New Brunswick. So I was in the middle, and on any given day, I could be driving to New York or Philly. And being radio, you would get this yourself, like it's essential personnel. So I had to work. As silly as sports radio sounds for essential personnel, that was the case. So I was working. But it did change things pretty dramatically because as much as I was doing work in Philly and New York, very shortly after, with my national show in New York, they put me on hold and basically said, hey, we've only got so many shifts to give out and you're not going to be one of those guys that's getting shifts. And considering that I had a nationally syndicated show with my name on it, and I was only a part-time employee, it wasn't even like a full-time job and salary. I was pretty shocked by that. And I saw it as a wake-up call. And for me, it was like I had doubts about where the radio industry was going anyway. So I kind of figured, all right, well, I don't feel so secure or happy with my current situation. And I don't like where the industry is going. And this is a chance to reset. And so the pandemic is actually what got me connected to a podcast studio and started to open my eyes to a life beyond radio.
So, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri. It always seems as though Philly and Kansas City have this similar vibe sports-wise. It's kind of a blue-collar town. There's a real rabid fan base. Like the last couple of years, the Phillies were in the playoffs. That camera would just shake like crazy, and that's what was going on in KC back in 14-15. Have you spent time here in Kansas City?
I've never been to Kansas City, unfortunately, which is funny, too, because when you talk about the similarities, like Andy Reid is the biggest similarity you can think of, right? Like decade plus in Philly and now a decade plus in Kansas City. I mean, it's amazing. Like he's this unifying figure and they played, Kansas City and Philly Super Bowl was just 2 years ago. So it's all recent. It's all connected and I've just never had the chance to make it.
Well, and I keep thinking this year, the Phillies are just on a tear and the Royals are finally doing good. I have all these visions of like 1980 with Mike Schmidt and George Brett.
Well, hey, it'd be great. I mean, anytime the Phillies, like for the last couple of years, I mean, getting to the NLCS and World Series, like the city lights up. So for me, and this is one of the funny things about doing sports radio, I'm not a diehard baseball guy at all. For the most part, I don't really like baseball, but I had to talk about it all the time. And as much as I wasn't into it in that way, like seeing the way the city responded to it and how diehard people are about it, like that energy of a team on a run is just unbeatable.
So talk to me a little bit about right now in 2024, exactly what you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third grade students at Career Day, and one of the kids says, hey, what do you do for a living? What would be
it's a job that when I was a third grader didn't mean anything to anybody. It was completely made up. I'm an executive podcast producer. So what I do with that is I help people come up, and these are business owners. Like these are everyday people. You know what I mean? Like this isn't a big corporate like massive machine of advertising kind of job. The idea is that podcasting, and you know this, you're doing it. Like podcasting is a valuable tool. You get to connect with so many different people. And for a small business owner, as a charitable foundation, for people who are looking to build a brand, to have this opportunity to build a show that is sustainable, because so many people start a show, have no idea all the work that goes into it, and then they pretty much give up immediately. And I understand why. It's a ton of work to edit, to record, to schedule, like all the different things to promote. It's a lot of work. So I help people who see the value in podcasting and want to use it for their business, for their brand, whatever they've got. I help them get the proper starting point of like defining what the show is, how does it help their business or what they're trying to build, how do you talk about that in very specific topics, and then I assign producers to help manage other parts of the operation, the recording, the editing, all that kind of stuff.
Did you always want to get into broadcasting? What was your dream in the third grade?
My dream in the third grade was to be a late night talk show host, and frankly, I did it. It was pretty unbelievable, you know. Like for me as a kid, it was like I always loved comedy. I was always watching The Simpsons and Seinfeld. Like they played them every single night for an hour each, so I always watched all of that. I was just a diehard comedy nut. Stand-up comedy specials and everything when they were running them all the time on Comedy Central. Like I was just deep into all of that, and the highest level of that for me was Conan O'Brien. And I just loved the guy. I just thought he was incredibly smart, but so dumb. Like to position that intelligence in such a ridiculous way was just so, it was so great. It was just a whole new world of like, I didn't realize that you could do things like this on television and build a life and career out of it. So to see what those late night talk shows were and to have such a love for comedy, like that's where I wanted to be. It was that kind of energy. And then, you know, for me, once I got out of college, it was like, okay, well, am I going to work in, you know, commercials? Maybe I'll like write commercials. I was doing some stand-up. I was just playing around, just trying to figure it out. And I ended up getting a job in promotions at WIP in Philly. And I realized pretty quickly that I could be on the air. And once I figured out, oh my God, I could actually have a sports talk show and like, you know, seeing all these ridiculous, because like there's a fun camaraderie to it, having a show with co-hosts and the energy with callers and bits and events. And it was like, wow, like this is something that I can actually do. I'm on the doorstep of this and I'm going to go for it. So yeah, I mean, I wanted that late night talk show is really how it started as a kid. And by the time I was, you know, wrapping up my career in radio, I was leaving the nationally syndicated show.
It's amazing how David Letterman created that legacy that kind of branched out into Conan and then went into all of these guys that are out there, because it was just, there were so many levels of absurdity that went into it. But you're speaking to the choir. Conan was always my favorite. He always had that special blend of how he did his comedy. It was always delightful.
Yeah, and the cool thing is with him, too, I mean, he's made so many transitions in his career. So, I mean, he starts as a writer, and he's with The Simpsons and SNL. Then he gets the late night show. He does that forever. But once he's doing that, I mean, now, great podcast. Like, one of the best podcasts out there because he's such a great interviewer. His ability to drift from the different kinds of people that he's talking to and know the right ways to approach them, whether he's going to goof around a lot or whether he's going to be really, you know, deep and thoughtful and dramatic based on who these people are and what they can provide. Like, he just knows how to work with people to get the most out of them. And to see him transition like that and then also have like a goofy travel show, which is kind of an extension of his late night show on HBO, like all those things together, it's just like he just totally gets it, totally monitored. And as much as I was just talking with friends of mine about this the other day, as much as time has moved so much and comedy can always move and change, Conan is like the exact same guy and it still works. It still works all these years later because he's just smart and funny, and it's in like this harmless, goofy kind of way.
So in the realm of sports broadcasting, who is kind of a hero, or who is someone that really you learned and garnered a lot from?
Yeah, I mean, so many people were really instrumental for me. And coming up, you know, I mean, that's the thing. I came up at WIP, so it was really all of the people in the building. There were so many different people. And I was lucky enough to work on Angelo Cataldi's show, number one. So Angelo Cataldi, morning voice in Philly, WIP for 30 years. One of the top-rated morning shows for 30 years and retired of his own volition. So, like, absolutely amazing what he was able to do, all these big events and his legacy on the city. But for the thing about him, I mean, just an absolute genius, like evil mastermind, if you will, in terms of crafting a story and being able to emphasize all of the points in that to drive the topic and drive conversation and support the argument and support this idea that he was presenting to people. And to watch that all the time and be able to talk to him after the shows, like every couple of weeks, I would just say, "Hey, Ange, you got 20 minutes after the show. Would just love to ask you about some things that you've been doing lately." And like, he would give me that time. That was huge. He'd also yell at me when I was doing the overnight shows that would lead into him. So when I got a little higher on the ladder, I was his lead-in. I would do some fill-ins in the overnight in Philly. So he would listen to me on the way in, and then he'd be like, "Hey, well, you did this thing. It was stupid. Why did you do that? Don't do that. Do this." And it was like, okay. And I appreciated that because he cared. You know what I mean? He wouldn't have coached me if he didn't care. So that was great. Big Daddy Graham, who was the guy I would fill in for in those late nights. Steve Trevelise, John Kincaid, who did a lot of national work. There was Spike Eskin, who ran the station. Like, all these people put very serious amounts of time and gave me time, whether it was convenient or not. They gave me the opportunity to pick their brains on what made good content. They gave me opportunities in different ways, and I was able to make the most out of that and take my career where I wanted it to be.
So I'm curious, of all of the interviews and all of the hours of broadcasting that you've done, was there a particular interview or a particular time in your life where you grew the most that really kind of groomed you for the bigger limelight?
It's an interesting thing. I mean, there's times where there were certain interviews where, because here's my problem, right, is there were times for me where it's just that level of anxiety got so strong because it's Philly sports talk radio. Like, it is not, like, it's not the friendliest place on the planet. And I think a lot of times there were mistakes or times where I would say something because my view and kind of my persona as I'm figuring this all out did not jive with what Philly people wanted. Like, a lot of times I did this with the mindset of, I'm an analyst that happens to be an Eagles fan, but I love the NFL. I love the league. I like players on different teams. I always got jerseys of players on other teams as a kid. I'd play as those other teams in Madden, and I love fantasy football. And you know what I mean? So it was like, I love the sport. I love how it works. I certainly had players I didn't like, but I wasn't all in on the Eagles all the time, and everybody else stinks. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that. And it wasn't this approach of, I don't know, like, I'm the full-on, absolutely cold-blooded analyst, but I was more analytical than I was a fan, So I think to that degree, a lot of people got upset with me because I would give opinions, and those were things of, I've watched these games, I've rewatched these games, I'm reading league news, I'm looking at contract structures. Like, I'll just give these opinions on things and put a lot of time and research into it. And I would just get crushed from people who had really no level of understanding sometimes of what I was talking about. Just because they're a local fan, they don't have the time to dig into that stuff. They just want to see their team win, and that's what it's about. And like, as I've gotten older, I understand that, but it was always frustrating to get these times where on social media people are attacking you and saying all these things about you on a personal level based on a sports opinion. And I think just constantly going through that process in small ways was it shaped me. It definitely shaped me to a certain degree. And like, the height of that, so this is the height of it, Joe, as we talk about like the intensity of sports fandom. The Eagles in 2017 were going on a Super Bowl run, and as they're in the NFC Championship game, they're playing the Minnesota Vikings. And going into that game, the Minnesota Vikings were a really good team, and the Eagles were mostly a good team, but Nick Foles was taking it over for Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was the MVP of the league if he finished the season. Absolute dynamo. So it looked like he was going to be a true superstar. And then Nick Foles steps in for him as a backup and absolutely stinks up the joint, and they eke by in the first playoff game. And I'm looking at this game against the Vikings, and I'm like, look, guys, I think it's been a great run. I think they're going to lose. Like, just looking at all the different trends and everything, I think they're going to lose. And I was crucified publicly for the kinds of things that I was talking about, for the opinion of here's A, B, and C of why I think they're going to lose this game. And I wasn't trying to do it to be a troll, which is like such a common thing to do in sports media. It was just like, this is my actual opinion of it. This is how I think it's going to go. And I had people calling into other shows about me around the clock to complain about my opinion, and again, tweeting all these negative things about me. So it got really crazy. It got more personal than I think it should for conversations like that, but that's what the job is, and I had to deal with it. I just had to grow from it.
So if you could have a dream interview with anybody alive on the planet right now, who would you love to sit down and talk to?
God, well, one of the guys is Conan. I mean, it just is. Like I've been such a fan of his and the way he's navigated his career and everything that we've talked about. I feel like half of this interview has been me talking about Conan. It is what it is. I'm just a massive fan of the guy, and if I could pick anybody to sit down and talk with, it'd be him.
So of all of the things that you do right now, kind of juggling all of these roles, what is it that's the motivator for you every day to get up to do this work? And not only to do it well, but to also evolve as a human being yourself?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is just outright success, man. I'm hungry. Like, I've been doing all this stuff for a while. I did all the radio work. I put in 10 years, late nights, overnights, weekends, holidays, like everything you could possibly do. I climbed the ladder faster than I should have because I put in the work. And because of that, I was expecting certain things to go my way. I wanted the full-time job. I wanted the security. I wanted the career in that way. And when it got to a certain point where I figured this might not happen and it's not worth, dedicating my entire life versus this last decade to radio, I had to rebuild my life again. I had to rebuild everything of what I thought my life was going to be, my career. Now all the money that I bring in the door is based on me. And I've had to evolve a lot as a business owner now that I've become one. So with that, it's just like I'm ready to build, man. I want to be able to retire comfortably. I want to be able to sit on a beach and have the business run without me. Like, it's all those common drives that I think a lot of people have. And now that I'm in this situation, having the skill set that I got from radio, I want to be able to apply that and build this life, but also simultaneously do it in a way that actually helps people. Like I am a business owner. I know what it's like. It is hard, and to understand marketing and have the time for it, and to be able to want to engage with those things or overcommit to projects, and then you're not getting anywhere. Like, I know what those grinds feel like, and so to be able to actually help people do that consistently and build their lives and their businesses or their foundations and do more good work, like that's a great place to be. So I think it's it's comfort, it's peace, it's community. And I want to build all those things, and I've dedicated my life to it.
So of all of the things that you've done and evolved into in your life and career at this point, what are you the proudest of?
Man, honestly, this is a weird thing to say. I'm a good person. I'm proud to be a good person. I think there is a lot of ways where, things can get really ugly. People can get very judgmental. There's you talk about political climate and where a lot of things go. There's just a lot of hatred in the air. Like, it's a really tough time, and I think it's easy for people in a lot of situations to get nasty, to be competitive, to be disrespectful, and things like that. And like, I just try to go about my business and treat people well. I try to respect them. I try to make sure they feel comfortable. They feel like they've got a voice in things. And trying to balance that while building a business is not easy, because I think the easiest thing to do is like, hey, I'm going to take a client that I don't think this person is going to do much with this. I don't think it's a good fit for them to do a podcast, but you know what? I'm going to make some money off it. I don't care. Like, I don't operate that way. I tell people they're not a good client for me and they should go somewhere else. Like, I would rather treat people better and do it that way and build my life and business that way than succumb to other things that get me off of my principles. And to establish that and really start to live it day to day as I've been pressed at certain points, it's just been good to know that at the end of the day, it's really who I am, and I'm really proud of that.
What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
There's so many different things. I mean, a lot of the simple stuff is the truest. As non-flattering as it might be, the first time, like, just the idea of like putting in hard work and effort, right? Like the first time that really clicked with me was anything less than your best wastes the gift, is a fun way to say it. I heard that when I was in high school. I never heard it that way. And I just thought it was really compelling. And as a high schooler that never tried at anything because, school was easy for the classes that I was kind of interested in, and for the other class I wasn't interested in, I knew I wasn't going to be a biologist. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? So it was dumb. It was a waste of my time. So I didn't try hard. But things like that started to click with me a little bit more, and that really took hold. And then otherwise, I mean, I don't know. It's just different. It's just different, like smaller bits of information that have really piled up than singular big hits, like things about time management and just respecting the idea of like, yeah, you've got a business, you want to build a life, you want to do all these things, but you also got to go home. Like, I've got a fiance, I've got to be available to her. I've got to be, focused on our lives outside of work and what that means to have friends and family and attend parties and build connections and stuff like that. So like, those kind of, it's those quotes about like balance that have really meant a lot, because radio is such a business where balance doesn't exist. Like I said earlier, late nights, overnights, weekends, holidays, that's the expectation. And if you don't do it, you're going to fall behind.
So if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one game, where are you going to go? What game would you love to have seen?
Oh, man, this is a good one. Okay, I am a big fan of the idea that, as a football diehard, first and foremost, I think the best game you can go to is not the Super Bowl, it's a conference championship. And I say that with the idea that, a Super Bowl is just people from everywhere. You know what I mean? It's like all across the country. It's a big status thing. You're paying crazy amounts for the tickets. It's all a big circus. So with that, people are like into the game, but it's not the same as getting a home crowd that is super locked in and all about this team and lives and breathes it. And now this stadium is, as a group, watching their team go to a Super Bowl. Like, that feeling is unbelievably cool, super cool. And to think about, there was this time, I guess this was 2004, when, the Patriots eventually cheated and beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl because they cheated. I'm just saying, look it up, Spygate. Not bitter. But when the Eagles won that NFC Championship game, they beat Mike Vick and the Atlanta Falcons. It was an electric game. There's all these iconic moments from a Philly standpoint of like big hits and stuff. But to be in the stadium at that time, watch those players win the NFC Championship and go to the Super Bowl would have been such an electric thing. I really wish I could have been there for that. That would be the game.
Wow, that's wonderful. So I'm curious, everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, everybody in your business world, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are, Vince?
Yeah, like I said, I'm a good person. Like, I just try to treat people well. I'm not trying to game anybody. I go into negotiations or anything where it's like a sense of building a business relationship from an open standpoint of like, are we actually going to work together on this? Is this a collaborative thing or is it not, right? And for the people who seem a little more selfish, standoffish, whatever it might be, like, I'm not interested in working with those people. I just don't think it's going to work. So that's one of the biggest things for me, is that collaborative element. The other idea is innovation. Like, I'm going to work myself to the bone, trying to find the right ways to make something work. And if I have to take resources from different areas, like when I was doing sports talk radio, I looked at lawyers to some degree. I looked at priests. Like, you are presenting an argument to a room full of people and you want to convince them. You know what I mean? Like, what are the things that they do? What are those like verbal tricks that help them connect? I thought that was interesting. Thinking about being a business owner, like, reading about successful people in different areas, reading about different niches, being a podcast studio, and the way that we were operating when we started, I thought about a gym. It's like, hey, well, gyms have monthly memberships and that's how people come through. Is that how we operate this? Maybe. So I always think myself as flexible, creative, collaborative. Like, those are the biggest things I think that define me. And I'd like to believe that if you ask the people that I work with, they'd tell you the same.
So Vince, if anyone wants to reach out, dive into your world of what you're doing, all of the good work that you're doing, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, so go to SBX Productions. Think of Sandbox, SBXProductions.com. That's the easiest way you can reach out and connect with me. Also, I'm on LinkedIn. So if you want to say hi on LinkedIn on the professional standpoint, and that's where you're at, that's easy too. My name is Vince Quinn. I'm in Philly. You can find me.
Great to meet you, Vince Quinn. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. Keep doing the stellar work out there, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.